The Dallas Cowboys are going to lean heavily on George Pickens over the next month. Is he ready for the challenge? We'll talk about that and more next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we are getting to your Twitter questions, including what is going on with the defensive ends on this roster. We'll talk about some potential lineup changes the Cowboys might be making. But I want to start with George Pickens here because it feels like the next 4 games or so. We don't know for sure how long CeeDee Lamb is going to be out for. Hopefully it's closer to 2 rather than 4. But this is a big-time opportunity for George Pickens, Landon, to show that he is somebody that the Cowboys should be investing in into the future. What are your expectations for Pickens as the number 1 receiver over the next month?
Yeah, I think it's really just being efficient with the opportunities that he's going to be given, because the truth of the matter is that he's immediately going to become, now that CeeDee's gone, the focus of the defense to try and stop. Like, this is a different situation than when CeeDee Lamb got hurt and Jalen Tolbert was elevated. I think that the defenses weren't necessarily having to do a lot to kind of stop and slow down a Tolbert. So really, at that point, when that happened, we just needed to see Tolbert beat single coverage and just be competent. And we saw a little bit of that, but certainly not enough for what we wanted. For Pickens, he's actually going to get the CeeDee Lamb treatment, I think, from a lot of teams, right? Like he actually will be accounted for by the defense coordinator. They'll specifically game plan to contain him. He's had some success early on so far in the season, and I think that now that CeeDee's gone, it certainly changes the angles a little bit for how he's going to be able to produce and the focus that's being put on him. So I don't know that it's like a production-based metric that I'm looking for him to clear, because I do think that with increased attention, it becomes more difficult to be to get a whole bunch of targets in this. And I'm not going to thrust that on him, but he is going to get his opportunities. And when he gets those opportunities, I want to see more of the touchdown catching George Pickens than the blanging off his hands and then into a defender's open arms kind of George Pickens.
Yeah, I can't base it just on production, because if he's really bad in the first 2 quarters of these games and he's putting up a bunch of garbage time stats when the Cowboys are getting blown out, and he goes 8 for 110 and a touchdown, nobody's going to care, right? Like, it's just not going to be that big of a deal. But if it's 6 for 95 and the Cowboys are winning these games, that's going to be way more impressive. So it's not necessarily a number thing.
Yeah, and if we're continuing to draw shell coverage because the teams are afraid of Pickens getting downfield, and our run game is continuing to be efficient because we have one less guy in the box than we would if we didn't have George Pickens, that counts for me. Being a threat and continuing to be a threat, that still requires you making the play when it comes your way, right? Because eventually teams will just stop giving you all the attention if they don't think that you're going to burn them, if they don't spend extra resources your way. So you've got to find a way to take advantage when the teams kind of drop their guard a little bit, make the big play down the field, remind everyone, hey, I'm George Pickens. I have to be accounted for. And if it's just a matter of being like a gravity guy, like CD is in a lot of games, that works too.
The good news is this isn't completely new for George Pickens. It's not like Jalen Tolbert or Jonathan Mingo, like somebody who has never been an alpha number 1 receiver. Like, Pickens has been a number 1 in Pittsburgh on playoff teams. Now, again, those have been some bad offenses, but he's done it where he's been the focal point for years. It's now just he's going to do it in Dallas, and he's going to have to be reliable. And I think the thing for me is it's the consistency in the little things, because you go back and watch the tape. There are a couple times where he doesn't run the right route, or he doesn't run at the right depth, and you see Dak getting on him a little bit, like, hey, you're not in the right spot. I think a lot of that stuff can be cleaned up. He's just going to need to be able to do that quicker, right? And I do think long term, this absence of CeeDee Lamb could be a good thing for the Cowboys and George Pickens, because the best way for Dak and George Pickens to get into rhythm and in sync is to play a lot together. And if they're going to get 40 targets over the next 4 weeks, that's how you start to build that chemistry and that trust. I'm fascinated by this, because I could see it going really well, and we come out through it and you feel awesome, and even better about CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. I can see it going the other way as well. And we get to November and it's just clear, like, hey, not the right guy to be opposite of CeeDee Lamb.
And I think you mentioned a really important part of this too. Is I do think that Dak Prescott is needs to be, not that he is being irresponsible, but he also needs to take some ownership here. And I know that he will, just knowing who he is, because I do think that some of the times that we've seen some of these missed targeting with Pickens and Dak, it's been a lack of chemistry, which I think is a two-person thing, right? It's not just Pickens necessarily, running the wrong route. So we need to make sure that Dak's obviously giving some focus and practice and getting extra reps in with Pickens to kind of finely tune that. Look, it's not going to be where he is with CeeDee. He's been with CeeDee for multiple years. Like, they've been one of the longest running QB wide receiver duos in the league at this point. But you need it to get to the point where if he's going to be the number one wide receiver, you're converting more of these targets, because you're putting the ball where CeeDee, I'm screwing up,
Pickens.
Where George Pickens wants the ball, not necessarily where CeeDee Lamb wants the football.
The other thing I'd like to see, and this is more of a Brian Schottenheimer and Dak thing, is figuring out ways to utilize Pickens as the number one receiver in ways that CeeDee Lamb is different. Because one of the things, like, Pickens is not fantastic at playing in the slot and yak and all that kind of stuff. Now, he can make plays, right? But he's at his best when he's like making plays vertically rather than cutting across the middle of the field. Now, they're going to do some of that. So change your game plan, change the ways that you're going to target Pickens. And just on some of these, like Dak, he's been awesome this year. You got to give him more catchable balls. Like the fade in the end zone wasn't catchable. Some of these throws down the sideline. Yep, on the sideline, like, they're just too far out of bounds. The Cowboys have got to find a way to best utilize Pickens during this 4-game stretch, or otherwise the offense is going to struggle.
Well, I got to say that I do think that Pickens' skill set and the way that he threatens defenses is probably the best fit for what you want for providing for the rest of the players, right? Because he's a downfield receiver. He's an X guy. He's a guy that can line up isolated on his side of the offense and win in one-on-one coverage. And I think that what that may do better than, when we've had to put CeeDee. I mean, if you remember last year, CeeDee had to play outside all the time because you needed him to provide for all the rest of the offense. And it wasn't necessarily the best part of his game. Like, his best part of his game is catching, intermediate and short passes and turning them into big plays, right? For Pickens, this is what he does, right? Like, getting down the field, creating vertical stretch on the defense, opening things up underneath for the run game and for the short passing attack. I do think that, one good sign that we may see is a continued usage of Jake Ferguson, because of all the space that Pickens is providing for him in the middle and in the short part of the area of the field.
All right, let's talk about the Cowboys' defensive end depth, because we are going into the season really excited about this unit, Landon. Like, really excited about what they could potentially be. So far, it's not been great. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick awards than anyone else. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all of the details, and Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every single model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make your everyday drive feel like anything but, with smooth handling and fantastic controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every SUV crossover, you can drive with confidence through any season. I know where I live, you have to have all-wheel drive, and Mazda delivers every single time. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are answering your Twitter questions, and this next one comes from Jonathan. He wants to know, aside from Micah Parsons, why was it conveyed to the fans that the edge depth was among the tops in the league going into the season, and now everyone stinks? What happened?
Well, it's kind of like the reverse George Pickens situation, right? Where it's like, when we talked about signing George Pickens, one of the best benefits we thought was the reslotting of all these other wide receivers and how appropriate it felt to kind of slot everyone down a rung, and how that fit their individuals, play styles, and also where they are in their development as NFL players. With the defensive end position, we've done the opposite. Except imagine we've removed CeeDee Lamb. And that's where we are with the pass rush right now. Is you like a lot of these guys, you like Fowler as the alternate pass rusher, who's your first guy off the bench opposite Parsons, but not as the primary pass rusher. You like seeing Sam Williams kind of mixed in as part of a group to kind of develop early on and give him the space to grow into being a better player, a player that uses his hands every once in a while. But right now he's having to be basically the primary pass rusher at this point, or a primary pass rusher. And he's getting a ton of snaps that we're throwing away. Nealon, you'd love to kind of relegate to a role where he gets to play a lot of early down stuff. And then as he develops his pass rush, you can throw him out there in necessary situations. Now he's like the third guy off the bench, and you need him and to spell a lot of these guys to get opportunities. You're having to force Donovan Ezeraku to play more than 5 or 6 snaps a game, which is not exactly what you want early in the year for a rookie pass rusher. So it's not just that the quality drops when you get rid of a very, very quality player. It's that you're forcing all the players underneath them to play a more difficult role, an upgraded role, and it's a lot to ask players to do to kind of step up. And especially again, this all got done 2 weeks before the season started. Everybody went into this situation preparing for their roles, and then the whole thing got shook up.
Not even 2 weeks. It was like 5 days before the season started, right?
So yeah, I mean, so it's just it becomes one of these things where they act like because Parsons wasn't at training camp this whole time that they weren't expecting him, or that wasn't part of the plan, but it was, right? And I think the fact that the reason it's being even more pronounced is because in this system that Eberflus is running, you need to rush 4 guys and get home, and that is putting a lot of pressure on specifically the edges, and you've just given away your best edge, as we've said, multiple times for the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's really as simple as when you have someone like Micah Parsons, that's the guy that everybody's going to double and chip and have their focus on. And that kind of creates one-on-one matchups for everybody else. Now, Osa Odighizuwa is still winning at a really high rate. Kenny Clark is playing really well. So you're getting good wins there. It's just the other guys aren't beating the one-on-ones or the extra attentions really at all. And I'm not shocked with Nealon, because Nealon is a really more of your base end run defender. And he has had some wins, so it's not like he's been useless. Fowler's been okay. I think Fowler's kind of been what you've expected. It's just that Donovan Ezeraku has not really performed well the first 3 games, and Sam Williams has not been as dynamic as you'd hoped. And that's why it looks the way it does. And I will also say that there's really no surprise when these guys line up. They're going to be the ones rushing. So like these offensive tackles aren't having to think about who's coming, who's going, who's, is this guy going to actually rush? Is he going to drop into coverage? So your scheme isn't doing them any favors at all. They're not getting any easy scheme wins. And I think the confidence of the entire group has just taken a big hit.
Yeah, I mean, it's you've seen Sam Williams come in here and get pressures, but he can't convert any of them to sacks. And then you see it's just the inconsistency, which wouldn't be so maddening. And I think the same thing with Ezraku. It wouldn't be so maddening if you weren't so overly reliant on it, right? And it's easy for us to sit here and blame Eberflus because it doesn't look right. The truth of the matter is he's dealing with a ton of injuries at two key positions, or at a key spot in quarterback, and then you add in what we've just talked about at defensive end. Those are the two most reliant positions in having an effective pass defense. So he's kind of making do with what he can. And again, it's kind of tough to spend a whole season with a defensive coordinator who's installing a plan that is heavily reliant on pass rush, forcing the issue and for coverage to work. And then for you not to have your top pass rusher, and then also to lose your cornerback, and then have another guy coming back from injury. It's just it's a negative feedback loop at this point.
And here's the other problem. It's not a problem. Jadeveon Clowney is going to play this week, and it's just going to take someone snaps, whether that's Donovan Ezraku's, whether that's Sam Williams, whether that's James Houston. And these guys are just not going to be able to get into a rhythm. And like someone like Donovan Ezraku, I want him getting a lot of these snaps, but he posted a 0% win rate last week. He needs to develop, but if he's not getting any pressure, I don't see how they put him out on the field.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing that's frustrating about Sam Williams specifically, right? Is that you feel like he is getting a ton of snaps and he's showing you stuff sometimes, and you just waiting for it to finally arrive. And it's like, he's still not breaking through. You're throwing a ton of snaps at him that you could be throwing at some 2 or 3 other guys that you also need to develop. It's just a very frustrating situation all around. And obviously you need to produce at the end of the day. And ultimately that's kind of what they were relying on Micah Parsons for.
In long-term, right? Fowler's on a 1-year deal. Clowney's on a 1-year deal. James Houston is on a 1-year deal. Sam Williams is on the last year of his deal. So the only guys that we know are going to be on the roster, Marshawn Nealon and Donovan Ezraku. Is it as simple as just drafting a first-round edge rusher and hoping that he becomes that guy? Or do you think they're just going to continue to add more second, third-round type of caliber players and try to fill it out that way?
I would be shocked if one of those 4 first-round picks in the next 2 years is not an edge rusher. Just for the reason that you simply laid out right there.
I will be shocked if 2 of the first-round picks aren't edge rushers over the next 2 years, honestly.
Maybe pass rushers, right?
However you clarify.
Yeah,
that, right.
I think certainly. It's that's where they just need physicality and pass rush up front. In the worst way. I mean, I keep watching Bain from Miami. We don't need to get into this,
Ruben
but
Bain.
you need that kind of guy. Yeah, I mean, but if you're talking about a body type, the Cowboys need a Jared Verse type player to kind of really make this defensive line reputable again.
Sounds like you just want to do a show on Ruben Bain here soon is what it is, right?
I mean, look, I'm a War Eagle fan, so we can talk about Kendrick Falk if we want to do that too, because there's a couple different guys I like here. We shouldn't be getting into draft stuff yet. I know it's too early in the season at this point. I know, but it is still too early.
It's a little early. All right, let's talk about some potential lineup changes that we would like to see happen over the next couple games, and whether we think they will happen or not. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 of bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether that's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. For me, I love the futures market. I got up early on Tuesday morning, looked at all the division winners, who I thought was going to win the divisions, the odds, who's going to make the playoffs, the win totals. Right now, you can get the Cowboys at 6.5 wins over on FanDuel. I know it's pretty bleak right now, but it's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add just a little bit more energy and juice to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, let's talk about some lineup changes. And this question comes from Gabe. He wants to know, could we see Juanyeh Thomas in the starting lineup soon? What about Maris Leofau? And what about Nate Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take all of them. Look, first of all, Juanyeh, he's already, we talked about it yesterday. He's already kind of rotating in, it seemed like, with Wilson. I think that they should be playing Juanyeh more to figure out exactly what they've got there. They've signed both him and Bell to extensions. I'd like to see them kind of go out there and mix it up a little bit more, just because I do think that there isn't a ton of benefit necessarily to playing the older safeties if they aren't going to play at a minimum level, right? And it feels like everybody's getting burnt in the secondary, right? Like it's not necessarily any one spot, but the difference is that I've got some young guys that I can look at right now at safety that I may not have necessarily at corner, at least the point where I want to even put them out there, right?
And I've got a good hunch as to who in the secondary is messing things up. And I'm going to guess it's not the guy that played with Matt Eberflus before in Indianapolis.
No, yeah. And I mean, the problem is that he's always been a high variance player, right? And like we've talked about it, like, when it was bad, it was just extremely up and down, right? When it got good with Donovan Wilson, he raised the floor on the bad plays a little bit, and then was still able to continue to make big plays. Now you're kind of underwater at this point. I mean, he had the interception obviously earlier in the season, but it was also thrown directly at him in an arm punt situation. And the downsides there have been pretty significant. And again, it's not even necessarily that he's like pull worthy. And I'll say the same thing for Terrence Steele in the Nate Thomas.
Let's talk about him,
because I think both of these guys, it's not both of these guys. It's interesting. Both of these guys, Steele and Wilson, at certain points in their careers in the last 2 years, have played poor enough to be pulled. I feel like if you had a solution to fix, like a guy to put in there, they probably would have put someone. And frankly, Juanyeh Thomas should have been playing for Wilson at certain points, last year more than he had. I think with Steele and Wilson, they are both not playing great, but it's not necessarily pull worthy. Wilson, maybe it is pull worthy.
I was going to say, for Steele, I'm willing to write it out, because I think as a pass blocker, it's been rough. Okay. But he's been such a good run blocker.
Good.
Yeah. And I think especially with CeeDee Lamb out, you're going to need to really lean on your run game
for sure
to kind of control the clock, not only just for your offense, but also for your defense. Like, they got to try to figure out ways to limit possession so their defense doesn't get exposed anymore. I'm willing to ride with Steele at least for a little bit longer, because he's been a good run blocker. Whereas with Donovan Wilson, like, let me ask you. Point? Yeah, well, I was going to say, do you see any scenario where Donovan Wilson is back in 2026?
I mean, I'm never going to say never, but no, I can't imagine that they re-sign him unless it's for like something like the vet minimum and he's part of a rotation. But that's why I think you kind of do need to see Juanyeh Thomas at this point. Is it's time to start handing that baton. And even with Steele, like, I think if the Cowboys season starts to go to a certain spot, like rotating series with Nate Thomas, that doesn't make it. It makes some sense to me, right? You start getting a look at the guy that you think is going to be the replacement there. You get him some snaps to kind of work in there. I don't know that it's going to be a drop off, and in fact, you may find that it's an improvement from Steele as he starts to get more and more of these snaps. But look, if you're going to have a lost season, like, it's the same thing like last year. Like, it's unfortunate we lost Micah Parsons, obviously, but one of the things that was a benefit of last year is that you felt like Micah Parsons learned a lot. You felt like CeeDee Lamb learned a lot because they both had to become leaders. They had to fight through injuries, and that's something that you could take forward with your team. For this year, I want to see these young guys get opportunities so we can see what we've got in them, and I want to see some young offensive line continuity start to grow so we can start to build that into a juggernaut.
One more position change or lineup change I'd like to see a little bit. Do you know who the Cowboys' highest graded player is right now on Pro Football Focus? Just take a guess.
Is it Reddy Stewart? Because sometimes I look up there and it's like, I'm like, what is going on with Reddy Stewart?
That's a good one, but it's actually Brevyn Spann-Ford.
Obviously. Yeah.
Okay, so he is their highest graded player. Now, again, the snap count is relatively low. He's PFF's highest graded run blocker on the season. Now, he had an awesome reception that was taken back by a penalty, but I think with the offensive line injuries you have now, and with CeeDee Lamb being out, I think leaning into more 2 and 3 tight end sets and getting him on the field is something I would like to see a lot more.
Yeah, he's kind of different than these other two because, like, he's outright earned his spot to continue to get more and more snaps. Yes. Like, this isn't even about, like, trying to, see what a young guy could do and trying to develop a guy. Like,
he's just better than Schoonmaker.
He's one of the best weapons you have on this team. Like, his blocking on the edge is one of the things that you do best overall. So, yeah, get Brev out there as much as possible.
It's just like lean into that, right? Like, if you're going to – you're going to have to change your offense up anyways because of the injuries. You've got 2 receivers out now with Mingo and CeeDee Lamb. I would just like to see them use more of these 2 tight end sets. Use more of my guy, Hunter Lipke, who has hardly been used at all since his contract extension. Find ways to utilize some of these players that earn snaps that have been playing well. Maybe you'll strike lightning. Whatever. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here on Thursday with a crossover show with Locked On Packers.